Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhakti Acharya Bhakti Mangai Vikya Padpata Bhakti Shri Vaikuntha. Right, so welcome back to this Nectar of Devotion classes. So till yesterday, we have discussed the first 4 items of the 64 limbs of devotional service. And we are in chapter 7. So just a quick recap again. We saw the preface, and in preface we saw about the brief history about Srila Rupa Goswami, how he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and other things. And along with that, we also saw the definition of Bhakti, Rasa and Amrita and how it differs from mundane Rasa. Okay, and then in the introduction, we saw 2 main definitions. One was Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu, and then the definition of pure devotional service, Anya Bilashita Shunyam. And we also saw the divisions of this book. Then in chapter 1, the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. In chapter 2, we started with Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Then chapter 3 spoke about the eligibility of one who can take up pure devotional service. Chapter 4 spoke about how pure devotional service, or the happiness and bliss that's attained from pure devotional service, transcends all liberation and material happiness. That's 4. 5th chapter spoke about the purity of devotional service, how devotional service itself is pure and one does not have to resort to any other activity to purify himself, to get out of this material world or to achieve the highest perfection. So, Jnana Karma Dhyanavartam. One thing is that we should give up the desires, and these processes, Jnana and Karma and other yogic processes also are not required for achieving purity. Devotional service itself is pure. From 6th chapter onwards, we started discussing about the limbs of devotional service, the angas, or the activities which are to be performed for devotional service. This is specifically with respect to Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. So Sadhana Bhakti has these 64 items of devotional service. So we started or it's assumed that you would have read the 6th chapter where the 64 items are mentioned, because we did not discuss all of them yesterday. And from 7th chapter, we started discussing each of these limbs. And primarily, it's basically what we are trying to do here is read through what Srila Prabhupada has written and try to understand more about it by reading through different references which Srila Prabhupada has spoken or he has written in his books with respect to that particular topic. So yesterday, we discussed the first 3, actually did 4, but the first 3 are considered to be the most important. One is Ado Guru Padashraya, taking shelter of the spiritual master. Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam, taking Diksha, initiation of spiritual master, and taking instructions from him. And we saw quite some detail. We discussed several aspects of that yesterday and also saw some references. And we also saw that Guru Seva should be Vishrambhena. One should be extremely humble and one should be completely with awe and reverence. He should serve the spiritual master, Vishrambhena Guru Seva. Then 4th one was Sadhu Vartmanu Vartanta. We should follow the footsteps of previous acharyas. And we also discussed how we have to follow the footsteps of Mahajanas. And before itself, in previous chapters, we discussed how sadhana bhakti, or to understand bhakti, it is not possible through logic and argumentation. Correct? It came in the eligibility. So logic and argumentation is not an eligibility to attain or to take up the process of pure devotional service. One must have unflinching faith and one should be ready to follow the instructions of spiritual master and the scriptures. These are the 2 main the prerequisites for one to take up sadhana bhakti. So therefore everybody is eligible. And to take up devotional service, one should not, or it's not required that one should be from particular caste, particular society, community, things like that. Everybody is eligible, and we also saw references for that. How even low-born person can take up the pure devotional service, how he's purified, and in those aspects we also saw Sri Jiva Goswami's commentary, where he explains all different aspects of how we should properly understand this particular principle. So continuing in the same way, today also most of it we will be reading. So it's like Srila Prabhupada will be speaking today. So these are the items and what Srila Prabhupada spoke to elaborate on particular things. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami only gives the main items. He does not give the elaborate details These details are provided in Hari Bhakti Vilas by Srila Sanatana Goswami. But here, the principle is that these are the things that should be followed. How it should be done are considered as details. So those are explained in Srila Prabhupada's books, in his purports and in his lectures. So we will be taking references from these purports and some of the lectures and try to understand what are the details of each of these limbs so that it's practically applicable to us. And we do not just theoretically study these aspects of devotional service, but also know how to apply it in our life. Okay, so most of it would be reading. The plan would be that we will try to complete this 7th chapter. In 7th chapter, totally first 18 items of devotional service are mentioned, means 18 angas are mentioned. 19th anga is regarding offenses. So Srila Prabhupada dedicates a separate chapter for that. That's the 8th chapter. And then from 20th onwards, again it continues from 9th chapter. Okay, so today we'll try to complete 7th chapter. And 8th chapter, I would recommend that I would suggest that you please read, because it's only a list of offenses. So you go home, you read those list of offenses, and then if you have any questions of how to understand a particular point, we can discuss that tomorrow at the start of the class, and then we will continue with chapter 9. Because as you know, we have to finish by next week, that's by next Friday or Saturday, so we don't have much time. And the offenses most of it are already known. Those who are practicing devotional service for quite some time, we would already know what these offenses are. But if here and there you have any questions, then we can discuss that tomorrow. So 8th chapter will not be covering in the class as such. You can go home and read. And then if any doubts are there, we can discuss that tomorrow. Right? Okay. So 5th is Saddharma Pricha, which means that one should inquire into the different aspects of bhakti. Saddharma means transcendental. Can translate dharma as religion, but it means that transcendental path, one should inquire about that. So till this point, the prospective devotee, he has taken shelter of the spiritual master, he has taken initiation from the spiritual master, then he's trying to render service, or he's rendering service to him in awe and reverence. And then he's also ready to follow the footsteps of previous acharyas. Then he should inquire. Athatu Brahma Jigyasa, that Jigyasa should come, instructions should be. Instruction is one thing, but to understand transcendental subject matter, Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya and Prayojana, one should start asking questions. Tad vidhi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevya. No, prashna is there, question is there. One should inquire, not in an arrogant way, but in a very humble way. So that is called Saddharma Pricha. So Srila Prabhupada writes, in the Naradiya Purana, it is said, if one is actually very serious about devotional service, then all of his purposes will be served without any delay. So the point is that one should be very serious about inquiring on devotional service. Saddharmasyava bodhaya yesham nirbandhini matihi. So those whose minds are attached to inquiring about Saddharma, to understand the aspects of bhakti, then whatever can be gained or whatever their desired goals might be, it will be quickly achieved. And we have already discussed that desired goal should not be karma and jnana or any anya abhilasha. It should be only pure devotional service. So the inquiry itself is, it shows our interest. Inquiry into transcendental subject matter shows our interest to the Lord and to the spiritual master. And that then they become merciful. Because if we show some interest to some person, then it becomes more open to us. Correct? If we are speaking to somebody and we are showing some interest into hearing what he's trying to say, then he opens up and he speaks many other things. So that's the way to communicate. So similarly, when we open up to inquire about the Lord, about his devotees, about his pastimes, about his activities, about his glories, qualities, name, form, and other things, then the Lord opens himself up. The spiritual master wants to reveal, or he desires to reveal everything to the prospective disciple. To his disciple, basically. He's already taken a decision. So that way, all his purposes of progressing in spiritual life is served without delay. That's the meaning. So this is a reference from Bhakti Aloka. This is a book by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he speaks about the six faults of bhakti, or 6 things which are hindrances to devotional service, and 6 things which are favorable to devotional service. This is these 2 verses are from Nectar of Instruction. So he elaborates on that. So this is from Tat Tat Karma Pravartana, and he says, as fortunate persons wish to follow the characteristics of the sadhu's devotional service, they similarly desire to know their duty. Means what are they supposed to do in following your footsteps? When we say this, the disciple should follow in the footsteps of Acharya, he should try to understand what his duty is and how he should render devotional service. That is Saddharma Pricha. So they similarly desire to know their duty. Unfortunate proud persons act just the opposite. As they search paths different from those of the sadhus, they disrespect the sadhus' determined conclusions while respecting their own. They do not care to preach the message, teachings of Mahaprabhu to the people of this world. Rather, they preach doctrines contradictory to those of Mahaprabhu. They do not know how much misfortune they are creating by this. Those who are simple endeavor to properly learn the teachings of the Lord from Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Lord's teachings are our only life. Saddharma lies in this alone. So the Lord's teachings are our only life. The bona fide disciple especially tries to understand Saddharma. If he cannot understand on his own, then he prays at the feet of his Shiksha Guru and learns from him. Those who have this kind of determination to know Saddharma quickly achieve their desired goal. Correct? So this should be our goal. So these first 5 items which we have been discussing is specifically related to approaching a spiritual master. Correct? The first 5 items till the Saddharma Pricha, it's specifically with respect to spiritual master. So in this particular purport from Canto 7, chapter 7, text 30, it's a very good conclusion of what all we have discussed till now, and it gives a summary of how we should understand the subject matter. So first is, one's first duty is to accept a bona fide spiritual master. The student or disciple should be very inquisitive. Right? We discussed this also. It's not that we take Diksha and then we do not follow the instructions and we are not ready to inquire from the spiritual master what we are supposed to do to progress in devotional service. We discussed this example also, that it's just like a dam. We block our progress by not following the instructions of the spiritual master. So inquisitiveness or inquiry from the spiritual master is also equally important to understand Sambandha Gyan. We might be sentimentally attached to the process of devotional service, and in sentiment itself take Diksha also. But if we are not ready to fully seriously commit ourselves to inquire about the transcendental subject matters, to follow the instructions of the spiritual master, then we will not make progress. It will just remain as a sentiment. And we also discussed that Bahujanmakari Yadi Shravan Kirtan, Tabutanapaya Krishna Pade Premadhan, what it actually means. Although Siddhanta Sarvati says kalpa after kalpa after kalpa, one may continue chanting the holy names of the Lord, but still he will not attain the desired goal of progressing, of attaining pure love for Krishna. So therefore one should be very inquisitive to know what the transcendental subject matters are. He should be eager to know the complete truth about eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma. The words Guru Shushrushaya mean that one should personally serve the spiritual master by giving him bodily comforts, helping him in bathing, dressing, sleeping, eating, and so on. This is called Guru Shushrushanam. A disciple should serve the spiritual master as a menial servant, and whatever he has in his possession should be dedicated to the spiritual master, right? Vishrambhena Guru Seva. This is the third aspect. Praner Arthet Dhya Vacha. Everyone has life, prana, his wealth, artha, his intelligence, dhya, and his words, vacha. And all of them should be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the via medium of the spiritual master. Everything should be offered to the spiritual master as a matter of duty. But the offering should be made to the spiritual master with heart and soul, not artificially to gain material prestige. Right? If you remember, yesterday we discussed, the spiritual master is not our servant. He is the spiritual master. He is not the spiritual servant. No, we are supposed to serve him. So we should not use the Guru for our own purposes and to gain artificial prestige. This offering is called Arpana. Moreover, one should live among devotees, saintly persons, to learn the etiquette and proper behavior of devotional service. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks in this connection that whatever is offered to the spiritual master should be offered with love and affection, not for material adoration. Similarly, it is recommended that one associate with devotees, but there must be some discrimination. Actually, a sadhu, a saintly person, must be saintly in his behavior. Sadhava sad acharaha. Acharaha. Yes. Unless one adheres to the standard behavior, one's position as a sadhu, a saintly person, is not complete. Therefore, a Vaishnava, a sadhu, must completely adhere to the standard of behavior. So his acharan should be perfect. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that a Vaishnava, a person initiated into the Vaishnava cult, should be offered the respect befitting a Vaishnava, which means that he should be offered service and prayers. However, one should not associate with him if he is not a fit person with whom to associate. Correct? We saw all these points in different aspects. Taking shelter, the spiritual master should not be a fool, number one. We discussed that. So, although he may have this Kantimala and Tilak, but his acharan is not proper, then it's not befitting to take shelter onto. So all these things we discussed yesterday. So these are the points which is being explained in the first 5. Then, sixth one is being prepared to give up everything material for Krishna's satisfaction. Krishnarthe bhogadi tyago. In the Padma Purana it is stated, for one who has given up his material sense enjoyment and has accepted the principles of devotional service, the opulence of Vishnu Loka is awaiting. Because he has given up material opulence for serving Krishna, therefore the opulence of Vishnu Loka is awaiting for him. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 9.9.16, Srila Prabhupada writes, the translation goes, for those who are too attached to material enjoyment, sense gratification is very difficult to give up. Even when one is an invalid because of old age, one cannot give up such desires for sense gratification. Therefore, one who actually desires happiness must give up such unsatisfied desires, which are the cause of all tribulations. We have actually seen, especially in the Western countries, that men who have reached more than 80 years of age still go to nightclubs and pay heavy fees to drink wine and associate with women. Although such men are too old to enjoy anything, their desires have not ceased. Time deteriorates even the body itself, which is the medium for all sensual satisfaction. But even when a man becomes old and invalid, his desires are strong enough to dictate that he go here and there to satisfy the desires of his senses. Therefore, by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, one should give up lusty desires. As explained by Sri Yamunacharya, when one is in Krishna conscious, he gets more and more happiness by discharging duties for and Krishna. Such a person spits on sense gratification, especially that of sexual enjoyment. An experienced advanced devotee is no longer interested in sex life. The strong desire for sex can be subdued only by advancement in Krishna consciousness. So this is the primary attachment in this material world, attachment to sex life. So that should be given up. So this is in relation to that. And if you see, Srila Prabhupada, he told one story once about Akbar and Birbal. And he said that Akbar once asked Birbal, what do you think about sex life? Till how long does it endure in a person's life? So Birbal replied, it endures till one's death. Akbar was not convinced. How is that possible? When the body is already deteriorated, and a person knows that he can do nothing in that, but not old age. But how is it the desire endures? So Birbal said, I'll prove it to you. Wait for some time. Then one day he asked Akbar to bring his daughter, who was quite beautiful and young, to a person's home who was about to die. And he told Akbar that you come and see only the person's face. And then you will see what happens. So Akbar brought his daughter and Birbal also came. And when the man who was about to die, what did he see? He was seeing only that beautiful girl, the daughter of Akbar. He did not even see the king. He's the Badshah, he's the emperor. But he did not even see him. He did not pay any respects, nothing. He was just seeing that daughter. And then Birbal said, see, this is what I told. Even though he's about to die, still that desire or the attraction towards that still pertains, still remains. Then Akbar said, yes, what you said is right. So this is how it is. So you might think that as age goes, now because the senses are strong, therefore we are attracted to different sense objects. But as we grow old, then senses are not strong anymore. They are not very strong. So therefore the desires would go off. No, the desires won't go off. It's just that our senses will not be capable enough to enjoy the sense objects. It will come only to that point. But the desires will still remain. And that is the reason why living entities or conditioned living entities keep on rotating birth after birth in this material world. Because it's not possible to stop. Or rather, they do not, because they do not have any idea about Krishna consciousness or devotional service or transcendental subject matters, totally materially engrossed, the desire always remains. So therefore, it's not that by progress of age, one gives up material desire. It's by purification that one gives up material desire. So that should be understood. So that's why Yamunacharya says here that when one is Krishna conscious, he gets more and more happiness by discharging duties for Krishna, because he gets more taste. And that's such a person, then he spits on sense gratification. Then he does not want to do sense gratification. This is the idea. To take up devotional service, to be Krishna conscious, is the only method to come out of desires, specifically lusty desires, and all other kinds of material desires also. Because that burns all the desires. If you remember, when we are discussing about the first characteristic of pure devotional service, Kleshagni, and then we saw that how from avidya comes the bija, and from bija comes the sinful activity itself. So the desire of bija, the sinful desire, seed, which is there within the heart, it can be burnt to ashes by rendering devotional service. Right? We saw the references for that as well. So this is what it is. So therefore, one should seriously take to pure devotional service, and that way, for the pleasure of Krishna, he can give up all desires for his own satisfaction. Right? Okay, then next is residing in a sacred place. Dwarakadi Nivasu, Dwaraka Adi. In Skanda Purana, it is also said that for a person who has lived in Dwaraka for 6 months, for 1 month, or even for 1 fortnight, there is awaiting elevation to the Vaikuntha Lokas and all the profits of Sarupya Mukti, the privilege of having the same 400 bodily features as Narayana. And then the same concept is explained in Brahma Purana as well, where it said the transcendental significance of Purushottama Kshetra, which is the 80 square mile field of Lord Jagannath, cannot be properly described. This is Jagannath Puri. Even the demigods from higher planetary systems see the inhabitants of this Jagannath Puri as having exactly the same bodily features possessed by one in Vaikuntha. That is, the demigods see the inhabitants of Jagannath Puri as being 4handed. So when they see from the top, they are seeing the inhabitants of Jagannath Puri as 4handed Vishnu forms. Right? Amazing. When there was a meeting of great sages at Naimisharanya, Suta Goswami was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. And the importance of the Ganges was stated as follows. The waters of the Ganges are always carrying the flower of tulsi, offered at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. And as such, the waters of the Ganges are ever flowing, spreading the glories of Lord Krishna. Wherever the waters of the Ganges are flowing, all will be sanctified, both externally and internally. Right? So this is a very important aspect of a devotional service. We discussed yesterday about the preliminary 10 items and the secondary 10 items and then the rest of the 44 items. So we are still in the first 10. So these first 10 are supposed to be very important, or this is something which we should follow to make progress or rapid progress in devotional service. Prabhupada wrote that also. After giving the list, then he says, if you want to make progress, swift progress, then one must follow these first 10. And also the next 10, which are the prohibitions, also should be followed so that one can make good progress like this. So this is one of the important items of staying in Dham. And of the 64 items, the 5 items also says Mathuravas, that one must live in a transcendental abode like this. But if we see practically, our situation is not that. We are not living in Dham as such from geographical point of view. Okay, so how should it be implemented in our life is given by Srila Prabhupada. He spoke in one of his lectures. He says this temple is spiritual, Vaikuntha. It is not Los Angeles. Don't think like that. It is Vaikuntha. Because here every second the remembrance of Krishna is there, therefore it is not Los Angeles. Or anyone who remembers Krishna always, 24 hours, he is living in Vaikuntha. He is not in the kingdom of Maya. That is required. Satatam chintayanto mam. So this temple is non-different from the Dham of the Lord. When we define the holy place or Dham, it is important because the pastimes of the Lord happened there. Either Lord appeared there, he performed his pastimes, or he spoke his instructions to, just for example, we saw this about Kurukshetra also. Srila Prabhupada wrote in previous chapter that Kurukshetra is important. Why? Because the Lord spoke. He was there and he spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Therefore, Kurukshetra is worshipable to us. Kurukshetra is not worshipable to us only because a battle happened there. There are so many battles that happen in so many places. There is a battle of Waterloo, there is a battle of Panipat. But these places are not important for us because Krishna was present and everything became auspicious. Even those who left their body looking at Krishna, they attained the spiritual abode. So therefore, Kurukshetra is a very important place for devotees to worship. Because Krishna performed his pastimes, the Lord performed his pastimes. Similarly, there are so many holy places around. And these are holy places, or these are the transcendental places because the Lord performed his pastimes there. In the temple also, the Lord performs his pastimes. And when we are discussing in subsequent sections, we'll be discussing about deity worship. And there you will see, whenever we have to enter the deity, we have to make one sound, a knock, and then we have to enter. And the reason for that is because the deity is performing his pastimes. He's a person. So he is with his associates. So then he's interacting with his associates. So when he's busy with something, And if we have to interrupt him, then you knock and then we go. That's the proper etiquette. So therefore, whenever one enters a temple, then he has to knock. One has to make some sound and then only he goes. Because the deity is performing pastimes in the temple. So therefore, this temple itself is non-different from a transcendental place. So therefore, now it's also said that in front of deity, one should not shout, one should not become angry, and we are not supposed to fight with each other, even though we may have some misunderstandings, but that should be kept outside of the temple. When we come inside the temple, those misunderstandings should be forgotten actually, because it's a transcendental place. And those who are within this temple premises are to be considered as associates of the Lord. So they should be respected as associates of the Lord because they have come to take shelter of Krishna. So therefore that amount of respect should be given. And we should make sure that how much ever we can help them or how much ever we can serve them, that much of service we should render to them. So whoever comes to the temple, that should be our consciousness. Not that we come inside and then we maintain our grudge. Even some misunderstandings between devotees and keep on fighting within the temple itself. That is not proper. Because this temple is considered to be Vaikuntha. It's not different from the abode of the Lord. So those who are associated with this temple, who are living with this temple in the ashram, then they are living in the dham of the Lord itself. So they get the same benefit as living in Vrindavan or in Mayapur or in any other places like Pushkar. Okay, so this is one thing that we should understand. So moving on, accepting only what is necessary. Yavad arthanu vartita. In the Naradiya Purana, it is directed, one should not accept more than necessary if he is serious about discharging devotional service. The purport is that one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, nor should one accept the rulings of devotional service which are more than what he can easily perform. So the perspective that Srila Prabhupada is giving is that this niyamagraha, we should not be so strict into these rules and you get up or you start performing such intense austerities which are not favorable for devotional service. Which actually, because sometimes we become so intense in our austerities, we want to renounce everything, that we are actually body conscious. We are not Krishna conscious. I will not eat this much, I will not eat this, I will not eat that, I will make this, and so much austerity will become. And then finally what happens? Over a period of 1 week, we are so austere, and then we give up to our that nature to eat or whatever we are not doing, or sleep for continuously 15 hours, 16 hours like this. So one should not get into this mode where renunciation becomes primary and bhakti becomes secondary, where we are body conscious of how we should be so renounced, but we are not Krishna conscious. So that is one thing. But at the same time, one should not be a bhogi also. Saying, prasada is there, chalo, fill up like anything, and then you are not able to do any service. It's lying on the floor for the whole day. Or you have get into stomachache or dysentery or whatever it is. So not like that also. So then the balance should be there. Yukta hara viharasya yukta cheshta karmasu. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one should be regulated in his activities of eating, sleeping, recreation and work. These 4 things one should be completely regulated. And that way one can follow the principles of devotional service properly. So therefore one should not accept more than necessary, means one should be regulating his activities. So one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, but at the same time one should not accept the rulings of devotional service which are more than what he can easily perform. And Prabhupada gives an example that it may be said one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra at least 100,000 times daily on his beats. But if that is not possible, then one must minimize his chanting according to his own capacity. So 100,000 times means 64 rounds a day. Generally we recommend our disciples to chant at least 16 rounds on their japa beats daily. And this should be completed. But if one is not even able to chant 16 rounds, then he must make it up the next day. So it's not that he reduces it more. So this is Prabhupada's direction for all devotees within his shelter. Those who come to his shelter, this is what his injunction is. He must follow this of chanting 16 rounds. He must be sure to keep his vow. If he does not strictly follow this out, then he is sure to be negligent. That is offensive in the service to the Lord, service of the Lord. Because the disciple, when he takes Diksha, he takes a vow of chanting 16 rounds and following 4 regulative principles. So there is no way it can be neglected. Otherwise, it's offensive. If we encourage offenses, we shall not be able to make progress in devotional service. It is better if one fixes up the regulative principle according to his own ability and then follows that vow without fail. That will make him advanced in spiritual life. So these 2 are primarily given during Diksha of following the regulative principles and chanting minimum 16 rounds. But then specific to one person's service, there might be some questions or there might be some regulation which would be required. So those things should be asked or they should be inquired from the spiritual master, and he will guide specific to that particular devotee of what he should do pertaining to his service. Or one can, if it's not possible to go and approach one's guru, one can approach the senior devotees also who are representatives of the spiritual master. And then he can also guide in that way. So therefore guidance is always required. So that way we should regulate our life in different aspects of our service as well. And that way one can make progress in devotional service. One should not be whimsical, that is the point. Not that something he's following, but then for other things, he just thinks, oh, it's okay, Krishna is merciful, I can do this, I can do that. Or if something service is there, then he's only speculating of how it should be performed. That's not the point. One has to use his intelligence, but at the same time, it should be proper, in line with what the spiritual master desires from his disciple. That should be clear. Right? Yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnava bodhasya, yoga bhavati dukkhaha. So by regulating one's activities, one can achieve perfection in yoga process. Okay, so Shajiv goes to my comments. Swa-nirvaha means for the survival of one's bhakti rather than body. So here if you see, one should not accept more than necessary if he's serious about discharging devotional service. This is not pertaining to one's body, but it's pertaining to one's bhakti. So the perspective is what is sufficient or what is necessary for me to engage in devotional service. That should be the perspective. Not that what should be enough for me to maintain my body. If I drink only milk, I can maintain my body. I don't have to eat any grains or any of the mahas that comes. That's not the proper way. Okay, it's not about maintaining one's body, it's about maintaining one's bhakti. Okay. Then, next is Harivasara Sammano, fasting on Ekadashi. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi day is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advances in pious life. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. So our consciousness, many times we see devotees, whenever there's Ekadashi, bhoga is most opulent. But other days, it's normal fare. But Ekadashi means different kinds of items come up. You know, this, that. There are so many different opulensic items is being cooked. You know, we become very creative. Devotees become creative when it's Ekadashi. Okay, but that's not the goal of enjoying different items during Ekadashi. The point is that one should increase one's faith. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada also recommended that although a person should chant 16 rounds, on Ekadashi one should chant 25 rounds. I think when we were speaking to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he said this. During Ekadashi, one should try to chant 25 rounds a day because the point is to increase one's faith and love for Krishna. Ekadashi is meant for concentrating on Krishna, for fixing one's mind on Krishna, not on being either totally austere, which affects our consciousness, or to increase the opulence of bhoga and prasadam. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. So demands of body also includes demands of the tongue. Should minimize that, not that we increase that. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and to hear his holy name constantly. So these are the two principles that one should follow. This is the 10th item, the last item of the first 10. Offering respect to the banyan trees. Dhatri Ashwathadi Gauravam. So which includes other trees as well. In the Skanda Purana, it is directed that devotee should offer water to the tulsi plant and amalaki trees. He should offer respect to banyan tree, Ashwatha, the cows and the brahmanas, and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions to his past sinful activities. So this is the verse. Ashwatha tulasi dhatri go bhumi sura Vaishnavaha pujita pranata dhyata kshapayanti nrinam agham. Human beings destroy sin by worshipping, respecting and contemplating the Ashwatha tree, tulasi tree, amalaki tree, the cow, the brahmana and the Vaishnavas. So same thing Srila Prabhupada also writes here. So one should meditate on the devotees as well, on the pure devotees about their service. And that purifies and that encourages us also. So by meditating on, say for example, what Srila Prabhupada did, what Guru Maharaj is doing, what our service is, what other devotees are doing, we become encouraged, we become inspired. And with that, we also become serious in our devotional service. So this is an anga of bhakti, on meditating the qualities of devotees, on meditating on the past, on the activities of devotees and of the acharyas as well. then one should serve the cows, the brahmanas, and definitely tulsi. And specific to offering respects to tulsi, there's a separate anga, which we will discuss in the 9th chapter. At that time, we'll discuss more elaborately of how tulsi should be worshipped. So Sri Jiva Goswami comments, the Ashwatha tree is worthy of worship because it's the vibhuti of the Lord, explained in Gita. Correct? It comes in 10th chapter. Bhumisura, Deva on earth means a Brahmana, because the Lord has descended on earth as the benefactor and friend of the cows and the Brahmanas. Go Brahmana Hitayacha. They also should be worshipped by the devotees. All those other items are mentioned along with Tulsi and the Vaishnava to remove doubt about worshipping them. So, in Canto 5, Chapter 3, Text 6, purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the Supreme Lord can be pleased only by devotional service. Therefore, it is said here that the Lord is surely satisfied by devotion and nothing else. Quoting from the Gautami Tantra, the Hari Bhakti Vilas states, Tulsi dala matrena jalasya chulukenava vikrinite swamatmanam bhaktebhyo bhakta vatsalaha. Sri Krishna, who is very affectionate towards his devotees, sells himself to a devotee who offers merely a tulsi leaf and a palmful of water. The Supreme Lord causes him merciful upon his devotee, so much so that even the poorest of men can offer him a little water and a flower in devotion, and thus please him. This is due to his affectionate dealing with his devotees. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Advaita Acharya considered the meaning of this verse in this way. Not finding any way to repay the debt he owes to one who offers him a tulsi leaf and water, Lord Krishna thinks, there is no wealth in my possession that is equal to a tulsi leaf and water. And this is the reason, or Advaita Acharya, he said, okay, this is a very good reason that I will offer tulsi and Gangajal to my Shaligram so that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself comes. Krishna comes in the form of, and propagates Sankirtan movement basically. So this is that pastime. Then, these are the prohibitions from 11 onwards. It's pratikulasya varjanam. Some things which we should give up. Till this point, we are discussing those things which we should accept, or that which we should do. We should take shelter of spiritual master. We should follow the acharyas. We should inquire. Then we should worship tulsi. We should worship, or we should go and live in a holy place. All these different limbs we discussed. Now, it's those things which we should not do. Okay, these are the prohibitions. So, Atha Shri Krishna Vimukha Jana Sangha Tyagaha. The first thing is to give up the association of non-devotees. It's the most important items. Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his householder devotees what the general behavior of Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Asat Sangha Tyag, E Vaishnava Achar. The first point of Vaishnava's acharan is that he should give up the association of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called Avaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. In the Katyayana Samhita, it is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron, or in the midst of a blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. So this is important for us to understand, and we can think about our own life where for our work purposes, for any other purposes, we associate with so many non-devotees. Association means not only physical proximity, but association means when we share or when they are giving their ideas, and then we get influenced by their ideas. That's basically association. Okay, in association, they tell about themselves, about what they think, or about their activities, what they do. And because we are in the process of sadhana bhakti, and there are inherent attachments that we have, and just by associating with them, we also, whatever desires are subdued by the process of devotional service in association of devotees. It's just like, in a ditch, we take a stick and then we, kind of mix it. Everything that is below, it all comes up. Right? It's just like that. Association of non-devotees is not at all conducive for one who is performing devotional service or who wants to advance the devotional service. It's just like all those things which has subsided, it all comes up. Desires are like these bubbles which are within a lake. And just by one small association with a non-devotee, or just by that, then this bubble comes from the bottom of that lake and then pops up. And then there are ripples created. This is an example which is given that desires are like this. In a lake which is very calm, you will not see these bubbles. So as if no, it might look that we do not have any material desires, we are completely engaged in devotional service. But one instance, even one single moment of attraction to something or association with non-devotees, specifically in this particular case, will be just like that small bubble, a small amount of air which is trapped inside that lake. It gradually comes up, and then it comes up to the the level of water, and it comes up and it breaks. And when it breaks, it creates ripple. Although the lake was completely silent, it was completely, very normal. But then when the ripples are created, then the lake is not silent. It's not, in a peaceful condition anymore. It's agitated at this point. So desires are like this. And famous example is of Ajamila. He followed all his Brahminical duties, all his Vaishnava duties properly for 20-25 years. And then just by one moment of what he saw, it completely destroyed his life, literally. Obviously, he was saved by the Lord at the end. But for the next 60 years, he married a prostitute. He had children with them, this, that, and all. Although he was married before he saw the prostitute, but because somehow he was attracted to that, then his whole life was doomed. And he committed all kinds of sinful activities also to maintain that prostitute. So therefore, association should be very, 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 very careful not to do that. Of course, in this material world, wherever we see people outside, they are engaged in all these kinds of activities. And Prabhupada explains that there Ajamila had to go to forest to see such an activity. But here it's right there within our hands. You open any social media channel and there you can see whatever you want to see. So therefore, one should be very, very careful. One should avoid all these things. So therefore, this Kali penetrating into the society of Vaishnavas also. So we should be much, much more careful. We should be much, much more focused on our devotional service. And specifically, give up the association of non-devotees. Our life should be arranged in such a way that we do not get any opportunity to associate with non-devotees. Specifically, this is a challenge for those who are working and trying to practice devotional service. It's always a problem. That's how it is now. But then what can be done? But then one should understand and we should try to mold his life that how he can get out of this kind of work etiquette. Whereas, when I was working, it was such a big problem. It's like social pressure. They go call you for a party, for a treat. You have to go, and especially when you are in a managerial position, then you have to be an example for others also to interact, this, that, and all. It becomes a big challenge, and we end up neglecting, or we end up rejecting, or basically we end up doing something which we are not supposed to do. Of course, if we are strong, we will not do that. But still, it's like going against the tide, trying to swim in an ocean. Better is to get out of that ocean. Why do you have to swim in the ocean and go against the tide? Better is to get out of it. So that's the situation. Anyways, so many things can be told, but we'll stop at this point. So this is the verse, Asa Sangatyag Vaishnavachar, Stri Sangi Ek Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ar. Right. So this is in Chaitanya Bhagavat, this is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's commentary, and he gives quite an elaborate detail about how important this Asat Sangha is. So we'll read this. Right? Yeah. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Kapildev says to his mother, Devahuti, if therefore the living entity again associates with the path of unrighteousness, influenced by sensually minded people, Asat Sangha, engaged in the pursuit of sexual enjoyment and the gratification of the palate, palate means his tongue, he again goes to hell as before. He becomes devoid of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, spiritual intelligence, shyness, austerity, fame, forgiveness, control of the mind, control of the senses, fortune, and all such opportunities. One should not associate with a coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman. The infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to women and to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a hind. Amongst all kinds of living entities begotten by Brahma, namely men, demigods and animals, none but the sage Narayana is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of women. Right? This is a famous pastime of Indra trying to agitate Narayana Rishi. And he sent so many apsaras to them when they were practicing penances. And what did they do? They were not agitated at all. And Indra was completely astonished. So he came. And then, or before that itself, Narayana Rishi, from the thighs of Narayana, so many apsaras were much, much more beautiful than the apsaras of the heavenly planets started coming. And Indra was completely bewildered. And Narayana Rishi, he generated one apsara from his Uru. And then he gave it to, Uru means thigh, and he gave it to Indra as his gift. So you don't have that beautiful apsara, you take this apsara, who's more beautiful than everybody else. And she's called Urvashi. So Urvashi was actually generated from the thighs of Narayana Rishi. This is what is point. That only Narayana is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of women. Just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of women, who by the mere movement of her eyebrows can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. Actually, Prabhupada used to give the example of Cleopatra. Julius Caesar had conquered the whole of Rome, but Cleopatra controlled him completely, just by the movement of her eyebrows. Prabhupada speaks about this in his lectures. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. The woman created by the Lord is the representation of Maya, and one who associates with such Maya by accepting services must certainly know that this is the way of death, just like a blind well covered with a grass. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to women in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman, foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man. Just like the form of woman is bewildering to the man, similarly the form of a man is bewildering to the woman. So it's not like women are being condemned that way, but then it's Maya for each other. So the woman foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and other material assets. A woman therefore should consider her husband, her house, and her children to be the arrangement of the external energy of the Lord for her death, just as the sweet singing of the hunter is death for the deer. Right? This is proper consciousness of a person. So this is from Brahmacharya and Krishna consciousness. So Bhakti Vikas Maharaj writes, remember, women are powerful. Caesar controlled a mighty empire, but Cleopatra controlled Caesar. Of course, having to speak with women or sometimes discuss something with them is unavoidable. If at all possible, mold your life in such a way that you don't normally have to have any dealings with women. The tendency should be towards zero dealings. Brahmachari should avoid physically touching women, for to do so, even accidentally, will agitate the mind. Keep at least far enough away so that there is not even a possibility of brushing against a woman's clothing. And preferably further still, means make further distance. Lord Chaitanya, even his householder life, would stand well to the side if he saw women approaching on the path. Nor did he joke with women. It's very important. The eyes have a tendency to stray towards women, but this should be given up. When a man looks at a woman, then Cupid, Kamadev, standing nearby with his flower bow, immediately shoots an arrow called Mohana, meaning infatuation, delusion, or folly, which causes the man to be fascinated by the female form. After this preliminary bewilderment, Cupid sends a further 4 arrows, namely Stambhana, which stuns the man and causes him to forget all else. Unmadana, which causes him to be as if intoxicated. Shoshana, which causes intense attraction. And Tapana, which deeply pierces the heart and causes it to burn. Hardly anyone in the 3 worlds has the power to resist the influence of these arrows. Maya is so strong that even in the midst of an enlivening kirtan, a devotee engaged in chanting the pure names of the Supreme Lord may become attracted upon seeing the form of the opposite sex, especially a dancing form. Therefore, a brahmachari should practice not looking at women and should especially never see a woman dressing, combing her hair, running, playing sports, sleeping, bathing, undressed or partially dressed. So what's the conclusion? The material beauty of a woman. So this is the philosophical understanding that we are going to see now. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 1.10.16 purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, the material beauty of a woman is an illusion because actually the body is made of earth, water, fire, air, etc. This is what it is. Although it looks very attractive, but the form is actually made up of only these elements, which are dead. This is dead matter. combined together to form something which looks attractive to us. But what it is, it's a dead matter. That's it. But because there is association of the living spark with matter, it appears to be beautiful. No one is attracted by an earthen doll, even if it is the most perfectly prepared to attract the attention of others. The dead body has no beauty because no one will accept the dead body of a so-called beautiful woman. Therefore, the conclusion is that the spirit spark is beautiful, and because of the soul's beauty, one is attracted by the beauty of the outward body. The basic wisdom, therefore, forbids us to be attracted by false beauty. But because we are now in the darkness of ignorance, the Vedic civilization allows very restricted mixing of woman and man. They say that the woman is considered to be the fire and the man is considered to be the butter. The butter must melt in the association with fire, and therefore they may be brought together only when it is necessary. And shyness is a check to the unrestricted mixing. It's nature's gift and it must be utilized. So this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. So asatsanga means association with women who are material, or with those persons who are attached to women and women. This is the most basic principle which must be avoided. Right? So this is what giving up of company of non-devotees means. Of course, we are not speaking about those women who have taken up devotional service, but that does not mean that we break that social etiquette and then go and talk to devotee women also. Because Maya is so strong, we might get agitated. That's why Guru Bhakti Vikas Maharaj writes that even when kirtan is going on and chanting is going on, we are all enthusiastic, jumping, dancing. You see the form of a woman and the mind is completely agitated. Although the woman is also devotee only. So therefore that etiquette of association should be very, very proper. Giving up company of non-devotees is essential. But we should always be aware of how we should protect our devotional service. How we should carefully protect the creeper of devotion. That's very important. Right? So that's required. All right. Then. Okay. So continuing, Srila Rupa Goswami gives another set of asatsanga or association which should be given up. And that is of those people who are attached to worshipping demigods. In the Vishnu Rahasya, there is a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods and who are impelled by material desire. Of course, asatsanga means those who are materially attached. That is there. But those who are materially attached, what do? They do different kinds of worship of the demigods to fulfill their material necessities. So those association of those who are demigod worshippers should also be detached. Because, okay, anyways, let's read this, then we will discuss. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is instructed that one may worship a certain demigod if he is desirous of achieving some material gain. Correct? Shukdev Goswami gives this in the 2nd and 3rd chapter of 2nd canto of Bhagavatam. For example, one is advised to worship the sun god if he is desirous of getting rid of a diseased condition. For a beautiful wife, one may worship Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva, and for advanced education, one may worship Saraswati. There is a similar list for worshippers of all demigods according to different material desires. But all of these worshippers, although they appear to be very good devotees of the demigods, are still considered to be non-devotees. They cannot be accepted as devotees. Because the eternal constant position of the soul is to render service to the Lord, not to worship the demigods. The Mayavadis, impersonalists, say that one may worship any form of the Lord and it doesn't matter because one reaches the same destination anyways. It's Panchapasana, and in an unauthorized way, Jatoma Tatopat, given by Ramakrishna. So both are bogus. But it's clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita that those who are worshippers of the demigods will ultimately reach only the planets of the demigods, right? Yanti Deva Varta Devan. While those who are devotees of the Lord himself will be promoted to the Lord's abode, the kingdom of God. So actually these persons who are worshippers of demigods have been condemned in the Gita. Kamastheritir hirtagyana prabhadanti anya devataha. Those who have this material desire, they worship different demigods. And they are called as hirtagyana. Means their knowledge is stolen. Their knowledge is not, their intelligence is stolen. They are less intelligent. It is described that due to their lusty desires, they have lost their intelligence. Yes. And have therefore taken to worshipping the different demigods. So in the Vishnu Rahasya, these demigod worshippers are forcefully condemned by the statement that it is better to live with the most dangerous animals than to associate with these persons. And it's also important because when we have taken up to devotional service, our previous life, for most of us who are born in India, has been worshipping of demigods. If we had maintained that culture in our life, we can understand. Based upon our family tradition, there has always been a particular deity or a set of deities or set of demigods whom we have worshipped throughout the whole life. And then after taking a devotional service and some difficulty comes, then the relatives will start telling, oh, because you are not worshipping this, our family deity, therefore you are getting this much trouble. You take to Krishna, you take chanting everything you can continue, but don't neglect worshipping your Kuladeva. Don't worship what our family tradition has been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you don't do this, then all these different kinds of problems will come. So we are under social pressure now to whether to worship demigods or not, whether to satisfy them by worshipping the demigods or what to do, what not to do, and things like that. But the injunction is very clear. Don't worship demigods. Because they have no idea, or those who are telling us, or those who are impelling us to do all these activities, they have no idea about the potency of pure devotional service. And we discussed, it's Kleshagni, one who takes up devotional service. And if you have read, yesterday I suggested you read this, Canto 6, Chapter 1, verse 15, purport. You would know, one who even starts with taking, or just an intermittent devotional service, even his sinful reactions are destroyed by the Lord. One who even understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and has some appreciation for that, even his sinful reactions are destroyed by the Lord. So that being the case, this suffering is not actually for neglecting the worship of demigods. That much conviction we should have. And this is the reason now why we are studying this in Bhakti Shastra. Srila Prabhupada gave us all this. Nectar Division speaks about all these things so that all these misconceptions are removed and we are very clear on the path which we have taken. We should not be thinking that, there might be some sense, or it might be because we have neglected worship of this particular Kuladeva or something, therefore we are suffering. Therefore, after and after so many sufferings are coming to me, let me go to this particular place and then do some service like this. That should not be the goal. Anya Devata Ashray Nai. One should not take shelter of any other demigod. One should be a pure devotee of the Lord, taking shelter only of Krishna and his devotees, specifically the spiritual master. That should be very clear. So don't give up to the demands of the relatives. Be convinced. That's the message. Right. Not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. So that is Shishya Adi. Anubandhitvadi Trayam. So, in the 6th chapter, this is given. There are 3 items that that one should not make many disciples, one should not accept unfit disciples. So there are 2 things. One should not make many disciples, and one should not accept unfit disciples. One should not construct many temples, or one should not read many books. How do we understand this? Srila Prabhupada writes, another scripture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he will be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. And one should also not be very enthusiastic about constructing new temples. We are constructing a temple here, but we will see what it means. Nor should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and accept the ones which lead to advancement of devotional service. Practically, if one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and this nectar of devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. One need not take the trouble of reading other books. So at multiple times, Srila Prabhupada gave a different list. He spoke, Krishna book is enough. One book enough for a person to make completely Krishna conscious. Bhagavad Gita as it is enough. Srimad Bhagavatam is enough. Or Chaitanya Charitamrita, the postgraduate study, complete. Distribute Chaitanya Charitamrita to all over the world. He gave instructions like that because it's the same message. It's the same message appearing in different forms. So therefore, just to understand the science of devotional service, any of Srila Prabhupada's book is sufficient. We don't have to go to any other book. Accepting disciples for prestige. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, verse 8. Narad Muni, while discussing with Maharaj Yudhishthir the various functions of the different orders in society, especially mentions rules for the sannyasis, those persons who have renounced this material world. One has to accept the sannyas order of life. One who has accepted the sannyas order of life is forbidden to accept as a disciple anyone who is not fit. Means the prospective disciple also should possess some qualifications. That is the point. And a sannyasi or a guru should be able to judge that person. He should not accept disciples only for increasing his prestige. A sannyasi should first examine whether a prospective student is sincerely seeking Krishna consciousness. If he is, he should not be accepted. However, if he is not, he should not be accepted. However, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. Therefore, in the line of Lord Chaitanya, even the sannyasis can speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. And if someone is seriously inclined to become a disciple, the sannyasi always accepts him. So, during Prabhupada was in US in 1966-67, a person will come during the initiation day, he will be initiated, and that's the last one sees of him. And then he never comes. So Srila Prabhupada initiated those people also who just came during the initiation day in the morning. They got initiated, they were never seen before, and they were never seen after also. So nobody knows what happened to them. So then after, when this happened, and over a period of time, when Prabhupada saw that, okay, this is one thing, so Prabhupada was very merciful at that time to give initiation. But as a disciples, sincere disciples who were serving Srila Prabhupada, and then they got into some difficulties, they were not able to follow the regulative principles, or they were not able to chant 16 rounds, then over a period of time, as the movement grew, Srila Prabhupada made things strict. And he said, now I will not be able to accept disciples like this, or I will not accept disciples like this. We should see, there should be a trial period of who should be accepted and who should not be accepted. So Srila Prabhupada did institute that. But in terms of preaching, for preaching purposes, he accepted many disciples, many unqualified disciples. Who was qualified at that time? Actually, when Srila Prabhupada gave the first initiation, he did not even mention about the regulative principles. After they got initiated, the first 11 of them, they got initiated. Next day, they saw a paper in the notice board saying, these are the principles that you should follow. That's how he started this movement. So that's for preaching purposes, to propagate Krishna consciousness, to make disciples. One can do that, but that should not be the standard. That is the point. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there is no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes even at the risk, a sannyasi in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. So all the Srila Prabhupada gave Diksha, the expectation was that he will start coming to the temple, although he is completely unqualified. And by coming to the temple, by associating with devotees, by hearing Srila Prabhupada himself, he will make progress in devotional life. So he gave Diksha freely, like this. But then people are nowhere to be seen after the initiation ceremony. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down. Means the spiritual master will fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. We discussed this yesterday, the qualification of spiritual master as well. Similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these things. And this is something, if we, again, no, I will not take names, but if we hear some of the lectures of devotees within ISKCON itself, it will not be from Srila Prabhupada's book. They will be quoting different scholars, mundane authors, mundane principles of having a relationship, having nice relationship with devotees, how we should be so peaceful, how we should maintain humility, how we should be so compassionate on other people. And they'll be quote different authors from different books, but nothing from Srila Prabhupada's books. Right? So what do we think? What do we say? That such a person should avoid all these things, and he has no business speaking like this. And he should be considered actually to be deviating from the process of pure devotional service. Because one is not supposed, or one should not read. For service, one may read. Okay, if some sections are there, and for preaching purposes, one has to connect to the audience, and then from there take that audience to Krishna conscious perspective. One may read some books just for his own understanding and dovetailing that in Krishna consciousness. But that should be done in a very careful manner. That should be done in consultation with the spiritual master. The guru should tell which books one disciple should read. A disciple should not take any book and read, even if it is Krishna conscious. Right? There are so many books which the Goswamis wrote, which are on a very high level. The pastimes of Krishna with the cowherd boys, with the gopis, and things like that. But if we do not have the adhikar to understand, that even if we read, we'll get only into misconceptions. So therefore, one should read only those books which the spiritual master recommends. And Srila Prabhupada's books, all books are recommended. And specific books, they should be recommended, or they should be told by the Guru to the disciple, and then he can read that book for that particular purpose or service purposes. Otherwise, he should not take reading of books, although it may be Krishna conscious. And also, we should be very careful of which author we are reading from. There are Krishna conscious books also, which are written by devotees, but then we are not qualified to understand them, or they should not be mass propagated. So those books are not meant for us. So we should be very careful. So whenever there's a desire to read a particular book, or we are attracted to a particular book or particular subject matter, one must consult the spiritual master. That's very important. Right? Okay. Constructing costly temples. It is also stated that sannyasi should not be enthusiastic about constructing temples. We can see in the lives of various acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they are not very enthusiastic about constructing temples. However, if somebody comes forward to offer some service, the same reluctant acharyas will encourage the building of costly temples by such servitors. For example, Rupa Goswami was offered a favor by Maharaj Man Singh, the commander-in-chief of Emperor Akbar, and Rupa Goswami instructed him to construct a large temple for Govindaji, which cost vast amounts of money. Correct? So, bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples. But if someone has money and wants to spend it in the service of Krishna, an acharya like Rupa Goswami may utilize the devotee's money to construct a nice, costly temple for the service of the Lord. Unfortunately, it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach wealthy persons to contribute for temple constructions. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual master for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. So construction of costly temples should be for the service of the Lord, should be for the purpose of preaching, not for collecting donations and living a very opulent and wealthy life. In other words, a spiritual master need not be very enthusiastic for constructing temple buildings simply in the name of so-called spiritual advancement. Rather, his first and foremost activity should be to preach. In this connection, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj recommended that a spiritual master print books. If one has money, instead of constructing costly temples, one should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. Right. So this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, chapter 22, 118, purport. Accepting an unlimited number of devotees or disciples is very risky for one who is not a preacher. Means one who is preaching, he can accept for the sake of preaching and propagating the mission. But one who is not a preacher, who is situated in his own mutt and engaged only in his own study, accepting of disciples and more devotees, what's the meaning? No, there's no meaning to it. He's doing it only for his prestige. So one should not accept. A person who's not a preacher should not accept. According to Jiva Goswami, a preacher has to accept many disciples to expand the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is risky because when a spiritual master accepts a disciple, he naturally accepts his disciple's sinful activities and their reactions. Unless he's very powerful, he cannot assimilate all the sinful reactions of his disciples and has to suffer the consequences. Therefore, one is generally forbidden to accept many disciples. One should not partially study a book just to pose oneself as a great scholar by being able to refer to scriptures. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we have therefore limited our study of the Vedic literatures to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhakti Rasamrita Siddhu. These 4 works are sufficient for preaching purposes. They are adequate for understanding of the philosophy and the spreading of missionary activities all over the world. If one studies a particular book, he must do so thoroughly. That is the principle. By thoroughly studying a limited number of books, one can understand the philosophy. Right? Of course, those who preach sometimes need to argue with the contentions of opponents, but as much as possible, one should avoid an argumentative attitude, because argument will not resolve the position. One has to refer to the Shastra ultimately. Right? In this connection, Srila Madhvacharya says, he quotes, "There is no need to take shelter of unnecessary literature or concern oneself with many so-called philosophers and thinkers who are useless for spiritual advancement." Right? Srila Prabhupada also discussed this in his dialectic spiritualism. When Hayagriva Prabhu and Shyamsundar Prabhu, they put forth all these different so-called enlightened person or the great thinkers of Western society, and they brought to Srila Prabhupada all the different perspectives. And Srila Prabhupada presented the Krishna conscious perspective, what proper understanding is. So he's not arguing, or he's not arguing with them, or he's not studying all these different books from different authors to understand what they're actually speaking. Whatever his disciple told, based on his understanding, he told, and Prabhupada presented the Krishna conscious perspective. So that should be it. And as it is said, that one who is Krishna conscious, he knows how to engage everything in, he has perfect understanding of everything material as well as spiritual. So all these different ideas that people come up with, it's nothing but different aspects of material idea engaged towards sense gratification. So a person who's expert in the philosophy, he can always give a Krishna conscious perspective and how he should help in progressing one's devotional service. So that is there. He does not have to indulge in discussing the various studies of Aristotle, Plato, this, that and all. That's not required. That's the point. Nor should one accept a disciple for the sake of fashion or popularity. One should be callous to these so-called shastras, neither opposing nor favoring them. And one should not earn one's livelihood by taking money for explaining shastra. A sannyasi must always be neutral and seek the means to advance his spiritual life, taking full shelter under the lotus feet of the Lord. In another place, Srila Prabhupada says, the temple and monasteries should be used exclusively by devotees who are serious about spiritual advancement in Krishna consciousness. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains the word Arambhan as meaning Mathadi Vyaparan, which means attempts to construct temples and monasteries. The first business of a sannyasi is to preach Krishna consciousness. But if, by the grace of Krishna, facilities are available, then he may construct temples and monasteries to give shelter to the serious students of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, such temples and monasteries are not needed. At Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he said, our temple or a place should be there where we can speak our philosophy. Although there are so many temples, people used to come and ask Siddhanta Saraswati, why are you collecting for constructing the different mathas and temples? And Siddhanta Saraswati's answer was, so that we can speak what we want to speak, the pure message of Krishna. Because in other places, we will not be allowed to speak. And although Siddhanta Saraswati was speaking at many different places, an attempt was made to kill him because people did not like. But if it is my place, I can do whatever I want. So therefore, I am collecting money so that I can construct my places and then I can propagate the message from there. So this is like, Srila Prabhupada equated that temples to these military camps from which soldiers are sent out for preaching. Soldiers are sent out to the war field of this material world so that they can preach and bring back soldiers or bring back devotees or bring back people, living entities into Krishna consciousness. So this is the base. It's the base camp. A temple is to be the base camp for all the devotees to go out and preach. It is not meant for having a comfortable and happy life. Right? So this is something which is important. We go to other places, other temples within ISKCON itself, then we might see that temple is being maintained or temple is there where collections and donations are coming very nicely and the brahmacharis are earning salaries. It's happening. We have to accept it's happening, but then that's not the proper attitude. The point is that whoever is serving in the temple, either congregation or brahmachari, whoever it is, they're meant for preaching. They're meant for spreading Krishna consciousness. They're meant for service. There are so many services involved for the Lord. One is supposed to only do that, not think of something as, or not think of the temple or devotees as the agents for my own sense gratification. That should not be the attitude. That should not be the goal of a person joining the ashram. With respect to this, in Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav, part 2, chapter 3, it's written, Srila Saraswati Thakur was sometimes criticized as overstepping Srila Rupa Goswami's proscription of Maharambha, ventures requiring intense endeavor like establishing a costly temple. While explaining to his disciples the section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, wherein this injunction lay, Srila Saraswati Thakur justified his position. It is a question of personal ability. One man might manage an empire and still find time for leisure, whereas another, despite laboring without respite, can barely maintain his family. In other words, whether an undertaking is considered great or small depends on the capacity of the individual. So, Maharambha means venturing or requiring intense endeavor. So, to some people, it might seem an intense endeavor to do a particular thing. But for a devotee, it might be a very simple task for him to do. So, therefore, it depends on the quality or the qualification of or the capacity of a person, what it is. So, here in Salem, when we are constructing a temple, we should be very clear or what actually is the purpose. The purpose is preaching. As Guru Maharaj used to say, once the temple is up, so many people will come. And then this Bhagavat Pradarshani is there, and so many different aspects of Krishna consciousness will present. And the goal of this temple would be to distribute books. Whoever comes, he will be given a book. Like that. So there are different plans which is being made for that particular purpose. So goal would be book distribution and preaching. So this is an agent, this is a tool, or not a tool, but this is the abode of the Lord, the temple, which is meant only for propagating the glories of the Lord, not for any other purpose. So that should be the proper understanding. That's what we should know. 15th is Vyavaharepi Akarpanyam. This is a statement in the Padma Purana. Persons who are engaged in Krishna consciousness should never be disturbed by some material gain or loss. Even if there is some material loss, one should not be perturbed, but should always think of Krishna within himself. The purport is that every conditioned soul is always absorbed in thinking of materialistic activities. A conditioned soul. He has to free himself from such thoughts and transfer himself completely to Krishna consciousness. As we have already explained, the basic principle of Krishna consciousness is to always think of Krishna. Smartamvyam Sadadam Vishnu. One should not be disturbed in material loss, but rather should concentrate his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. This injunction applies to the devotee practicing smaranam, etc. The devotee absorbed in service, however, will perform service corresponding to the materials he obtains, and thus will make efforts to obtain those items if these items are not present, instead of simply remaining indifferent to loss or lack of those items. Specifically referring to deity worship. So for deity worship, so many different items are required. So if those are not available, it's not like you just sit, okay, anyway, chalo, chalta hai, it's okay, like that. No. He should make an endeavor to go out and then procure those items for worshipping the Lord. So in terms of service, one should make an endeavor. But for himself, he should only do that much which is necessary for him, which is required for him. Not anything more than that. Shokadi avasha vartita, that is 16. A devotee should not be subjected to lamentation or illusion. Following statement in Padma Purana, within the heart of a person who is overpowered by lamentation or anger, there is no possibility of Krishna's being manifested. Right? One should not be lamenting in his life, or one should not become unnecessarily angry. So, this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 11, Text 16. The soul's designation, the mind, is the cause of all tribulations in the material world. As long as this fact is unknown to the conditioned living entity, he has to accept the miserable condition of this material body and wander within this universe at different positions. Because the mind is affected by disease, lamentation, illusion, attachment, greed and enmity, it creates bondage and a false sense of intimacy within this material world. Right? You read this, we'll read this again. Because the mind is affected by disease, the disease which we get, lamentation, illusion, attachment to material objects, greed, enmity, it creates bondage because we are trying to create what? A relationship between objects of this material world. Relationship between people, relationship with different objects. And this becomes a cause of diseases, lamentation, illusion, attachment, greed, enmity when there's disagreement. And thus it creates bondage. And a false sense of intimacy within this material world because we are so intimately affected by our interaction with this material objects. Prabhupada writes, the mind is the cause of both material bondage and liberation. The impure mind thinks, I am this body. The pure mind knows that he is not the material body. Therefore, the mind is considered to be the root of all material designation. Until the living entity is aloof from the association of and contaminations of this material world, the mind will be absorbed in such material things as birth, death, disease, illusion, attachment, greed, and enmity. In this way, the living entity is conditioned and he suffers material miseries. The activities of the mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. And if we are always thinking about material objects, we are feeling for them, and they are willing to act or to procure these material objects, then our whole consciousness is completely material. So one who is in material consciousness, how can he advance in Krishna consciousness or do the activities of pure devotion service? Because as we discussed, the attitude is most important. Our attitude is for sense enjoyment, and somehow we are engaged ritualistically in the activities of devotion service. It will not help. It will not help one make any progress in devotional life towards pure devotion service. So therefore, it is said that one who's overpowered by lamentation and anger, there is no possibility of Krishna's being manifested within the heart. Although he is there as Paramatma, but he will not manifest himself will not be available to us. Then, demigods, anya devatagnya. One should not neglect to offer due respect to the demigods. We are not saying worship the demigods, but respect to the demigods should be offered. One may not be a devotee of demigods, but that does not mean that he should be disrespectful to them. For example, a Vaishnava is not a devotee of Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, but he is duty bound to offer all respects to such highly positioned demigods. According to Vaishnava philosophy, one should offer respect even to an ant. So then what is there to speak of such exalted persons as Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma? In Padma Purana it is said, Krishna or Hari is the master of all demigods and therefore he is always worshipable. But this does not mean that one should not offer respect to the demigods. Right, so, yeah, so we'll just read this. This is again Bhakti Aloka. The endeavor for food and clothing must always remain, either in household life or renounced life. Therefore, there is need of generosity in such dealings. The mind of one who has taken shelter of the holy name is undisturbed, even if food and clothes are not easily obtained. Or if they are obtained but then lost, leaving behind all material enchantments, he takes complete shelter of Govinda. The purport is that whether a sadhaka stays at home or in the forest, he will have to endeavor for food and clothing. A householder should find out his food and clothing through agriculture or business, protecting the citizens or by serving others. A renunciate should accomplish this by begging alms. In those activities, a devotee should not be agitated if food and clothing are not obtained, or if they are obtained and then lost. He should peacefully remember Krishna. See, this particular reference, I think I placed it in a different place. This is actually meant for straightforwardness in ordinary dealing and equilibrium in loss and gain. Okay, so I'm sorry, I should actually have placed it there, but then it has come here. So this is with reference to that. Okay, that one should not be lamenting, or one should not be in illusion, or one who's overpowered by lamentation and illusion, then Krishna does not manifest within the heart of that person. So this reference is for that, not for not giving respect to the demigods. So kind of misplaced here. Householders lament if they lose their wife, children, etc. But a practitioner of devotional service should not maintain this lamentation very long. They should quickly give up their lamentation and engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. A renunciate should not lament if he does not possess a quilt, a water pot, or other arms, or if these things are stolen by man or animal. A practicing Vaishnava should give up all the urges like lamentation and anger. Otherwise, there will be obstacles in his constant remembrance of Krishna. It is explained in the Padma Purana. Yeah, the same verse. Those who endeavor for devotional service should only worship Krishna. They should not worship various demigods, but they should not also disrespect the demigods or the scriptures. When coming before a demigod, one should offer respect, knowing them to be Krishna's servant. In the Padma Purana it is said, Harireva Sadaradhya Sarva Deveshwareshwaraha Itare Brahma Rudradhya Navagneya Kadachana. Krishna or Hari is the master of all demigods and therefore he is always worshipable. But this does not mean that one should not offer respect to the demigods headed by Brahma and Shiva. Oh, okay. So what it is actually, these are the three verses which we have been discussing from straightforward dealings. Alabdeva Vinashteva. You see? Alabdeva Vinashteva, right? The next one is Shoka Mashadbhir Bhaver. And here, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes the same thing. Where is it? Yeah. Shoka Mashadbhir Bhaver. And then he explains that. Then this verse, Harireva Sadaradhya, is what we are discussing here. Harireva Sadaradhya. Right. So this is properly placed. He says, the purport is that the Supreme Lord is one and others, Brahma and Shiva, are his qualitative incarnations, Gunavataras. Particularly demigods are worshipped by people according to their qualifications. But Lord Vishnu is the only worshipable Lord for people who are in the mode of goodness. After worshipping various demigods for many lifetimes, one's life becomes auspicious when he comes to the point of accepting Vishnu as the only Supreme Lord. And one who takes up to devotional service directly, he does not have to worship the demigods. Lord Sri Krishna is the topmost manifestation of Vishnu Tattva. When living entity transcends the three modes by worshipping in the mode of goodness, he attains the service of Lord Krishna. Right? Not giving pain to any living entity. Bhutadu Nudvega Daita. So Srila Prabhupada writes. This is the statement of Mahabharata. A person who does not disturb or cause painful action in the mind of any living entity, who treats everyone just like a loving father does his children, whose heart is so pure, certainly very soon becomes favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In so-called civilized society, there is sometimes agitation against cruelty to animals But at the same time, regular slaughterhouses are always maintained. A Vaishnava is not like that. A Vaishnava can never support animal slaughter or even give pain to any living entity. Okay. So this is a reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 26, Text 5. When a man becomes too proud of his material position, he tries to enjoy his senses in an unrestricted way, being influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. He is thus described as asuric or demoniac. When people are demoniac in spirit, they are not merciful towards the poor animals. And even those who are not merciful to other living entities are all demoniac, even human beings as well. Consequently, they maintain various animal slaughterhouses. This is technically called suna or himsa, which means the killing of living beings. In Kali Yuga, due to the increase of the modes of passion and ignorance, almost all men are asuric or demoniac. Therefore, they are very much fond of eating flesh, and for this end, they maintain various kinds of animal slaughterhouses. In this age of Kali, the propensity of mercy is almost nil. Consequently, there is always fighting and wars between men and nations. Right? We are undergoing that, or rather, some countries are undergoing this now. Men do not understand that because they unrestrictedly kill so many animals, they also must be slaughtered like animals in big wars. This is very much evident in the Western countries, the most applicable in the present state, the state in which we are now. In the West, slaughterhouses are maintained without restriction, and therefore every 5th or 10th year, there's a big war in which countless people are slaughtered even more cruelly than the animals. Sometimes during war, soldiers keep their enemies in concentration camps and kill them in very cruel ways. These are reactions brought about by unrestricted animal killing in the slaughterhouse and by hunters in the forest. Proud, demoniac persons do not know the laws of nature or the laws of God. Consequently, they unrestrictedly kill poor animals, not caring for them at all. In the Krishna consciousness movement, animal killing is completely prohibited. One is not accepted as a bona fide student in this movement unless he promises to follow the 4 regulative principles. No animal killing, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. This Krishna consciousness movement is the only means by which the sinful activities of men in this Kali Yuga can be counteracted. Right? It's very clear. Okay, so we'll stop here. So tomorrow, before coming for the class, please read chapter 8. Read the list. If you have any questions, we'll discuss on that. Otherwise, we'll move to chapter 9, where there's further discussion of the further considerations of devotional principles. It's again a long chapter. We will try to complete chapter 9 tomorrow. So tomorrow is Friday. So we'll try to complete chapter 9 and see if we can start 10. Or else on Saturday, we'll complete 10 and 11. And next week, we'll do 12 to 19. Okay, so that way we'll be able to complete. Fine. You have any questions of what we discussed today? You can take. No? Okay, so stop. Srila Prabhupada ki Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu